Tonight's guest speaker is Denver Holt. He's the founder of the Owl Research Institute, which is one of the most active owl research groups in the world, studying owls and their habitats for 35 years. They have over 30 years of data for some of their studies and also more recent data for the last 5 or 10 years. Denver has had many published articles, including in the National Geographic and the New York Times. He's been on television. He enjoys educating people and people from all walks of life. So I really like owls. I'd like to see every owl there is, and so this will have to do. At the end, there'll be questions if anybody has questions.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for having me. We just finished one of our winter raptor surveys, so I'm a little tuckered out here. We started out early this morning. It was -12. Did our 5 transects, simultaneous transects for wintering birds of prey in our valley, and came up with 1,001 today. So that's our new record. So we had a pretty good day, but it was cold out there. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of take you through some of the highlights of some of the years of research. Most of our projects are long term, as you can see here with the snowy owl and long-eared owls, etc. You can go to our website and do that. And so I'm just going to kind of take you through and try to show you some nice pictures of owls because I know you like that, as well as throwing a little data here and there to tell you what we've been finding. So there it is. But this is just, very quickly here, 35 years of study just on the snowy owls. And we have all this with longer years, 30 years of lemming trapping. Our study area is 100 square miles. We found over 300 snowy owl nests. We banded over 800 snowy owls, mostly chicks. Recorded greater than 43,000 prey from pellets, 3,000 cache prey at nests. We put the first satellite transmitters on snowy owls in the world. That kind of, sparked the whole tracking snowy owls. I think we had the first 6 in Barrow in the 1999 and 2000. We provide the only live cameras on nesting snowy owls in the world, 24/7 on that. And, I talk about, the Arctic and Arctic conservation, and, clearly the snowy owl is the avian icon of the Arctic and can be used to galvanize Arctic conservation. So those are just some of the highlights there. This is the study area. You can see with that big yellow flag there, but Barrow, Alaska. Its name has changed now. It's called Utqiagvik, and it means a place to hunt snowy owls. The Inupiat people used to hunt snowy owls, take them as pets, take their eggs, and use them as a food source. But for the most part, that doesn't happen anymore. It's the only place in the United States where snowy owls breed with any regularity. And the one thing that makes it unique from all other areas in the circumpolar region about snowy owls is that there's always snowy owls in Barrow or Utqiagvik. They just don't always breed. We can talk about that. This is just gives you an idea. This is what they call the Barrow Triangle. And Utqiagvik or Barrow is right there. And those are snowy owl nests, but we'll talk about it later. And there's the Chukchi Sea and the Beaufort Sea to the left and the right. Collectively, this is the Arctic Ocean right there. I don't know if you can see my pointer, but I'll try. This is July, just gives you an idea. It's a very, very harsh environment. The ice comes in and out with the wind, and but it melts off. It usually goes offshore the end of June, early July, and then it kind of comes back and forth depending on weather conditions. And it's really a subsistence Eskimo community, the Inupiat Eskimo, primarily whale hunting and seal hunting, marine mammals, some fish, caribou, and occasionally other things. The snowy owls had a long history with the Inupiat people, and this is a Inupiat guy, Tommy, a friend of mine who's just carving out of this is a walrus ivory here that he's carving to make a snowy owl. And as you can see here, the base is walrus, and if you look up to the eyes, the yellow in the eyes, that's fossilized walrus ivory, and then the black of the pupils in the bill is a bowhead whale baleen. This is kind of what it looks like when snowy owls arrive. This isn't too bad, but very often when the owls arrive on the breeding grounds, it's just snow covered. People want to know, how do they figure it out to stay or move on? And, we really don't know that yet. And, I've gone up there a few times in the winter to try to figure it out, and it's really hard to do. And how do they evaluate whether to stay or move on, the number of lemmings for breeding. But as it melts off here, we start our searches. And if you can see up in the corner there, that little mound in front of the mound, there's a male snowy owl. So we start our searches and we just scan mounds and we scan the surrounding ridges. We're looking for the vertical posture of adult males. So they're all pretty much all bright white. And once we find bright white males, then we look for horizontal postured females, preferably on a nest. And so anyway, but you can see these guys for a long way off, even with the naked eye out on the tundra with binoculars. It's relatively easy for us as we can, spot the birds, or sometimes we'll spot some kind of interactions where females are chasing males for food or males are presenting to females. And it's all about lemmings, which is in that male's bill. Females want their lemmings in order to lay eggs and raise young. Ultimately, this is what we're looking for. And as I said, we look for the vertical white males, on mounds or on ridges, and then we kind of scan left or right, 500 yards in any direction, and looking for the horizontal posture of a female on a nest. This is a female's view of what's going on. As you can imagine, if you know what you're doing, you can see these snowy owls from great distances. And also, they're on the ground. So they have to be very vigilant because we have potential predators up there. Oh, actually, let me go back here. Potential predators that could, see the owls, smell the owls, or we don't know how they find them all. But so the females, you wonder if they ever sleep. So the first line, think of this here. Now look at me walking into a nest. There's a nest in the left-hand corner, and I'm walking in. And we did this just to illustrate, as the females see potential threats coming in from the distance here, what the first thing they'll do is they'll flush off the nest. And that's the first line of nest defense. So again, you wonder if they ever sleep. We've sat in blinds and watched, and they look like they doze off, and then they quickly arise, look around, then doze off, then look around. So sleep must be quite different than what we're used to. All right, and this just gives you an idea. This is just 1 year of data, but we have, 30 plus years of this data. So in this particular year, the females flushed roughly, 400 plus yards from the nest. So they see approaching danger, i.e. us researchers, and then they flush off the nest as the first line of nest defense. Because we know what we're doing now, we look for feathers and we can say, okay, the nest mound looks like it's over there because there's a bunch of feathers. We march to the nest mounds, and then behaviors change, and females have their behaviors, males have their behaviors in both nest defense and in raising a family. So this is the male. He might come in and bark at you, arr, 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 or he may hoot at you, ooh, ooh, ooh. As we get closer to the nest, the female may come back from flushing and stand on an adjacent mound and give you some threat display. She may scream at you. She may fake injury like a killdeer. Oh, I have a broken wing. Follow me, and lure you away from the nest. Or they may charge at you and try to intimidate you to leave the nest. And then the ultimate in what we call nest defense is the attack. So here's the male coming in. This is what it looks like when they're coming in for the attack. Okay, this woman, and Barrow is a community, so she was walking her two labs. This male snowy owl flew 500 yards across the tundra from its nest to whack these labs that weighed about 70 pounds each. Both of them ran under her truck, and the owl went back to business once it drove off the threat. They hate canids, is really what it comes down to. And this is, us at a nest here. And it's the same thing, a bunch of big hominids walking across the tundra, checking on owl nests. This is a nest here. This is the male coming in. If you look on the right hand to the right of his boot, right here, and you can see there's a young chick right in that corner. I don't know if you can see my pointer, but I'll try. And anyway, so this was actually a climate researcher wanted to come to a nest, New Patagonia coat. The owl ripped it up pretty good that day. This is just, there's just frequencies here. There's some independence issues, but we just wanted to show what the frequency of behaviors are. And just so you can see real quickly here, males blue, females red. So both bark, males hoot, females rarely do, females scream, males rarely do. Both attack dominated by males, both display dominated by females. When we put this together in these models, one of the things the questions we asked was, well, do more aggressive pairs fledge more young than less aggressive pairs? And this was part of a master's student project. And what it came down to is those males and females who engage in more aggressive behaviors, such as hooting, wing displays, and attacking, fledged more young, at least in these 2 years, than those that do not. But we have, much more data to add to this, but that's kind of what it looks like. So anyway, as the tundra melts off, the females dig, they dig a little bowl in the tundra and the females lay the eggs. Now imagine if you look in the distance here, if the female was sitting on the nest, would you really be able to see her? And so that it makes it really difficult. So clearly they've evolved the color white to match, the snow-covered environment where they spend most of their lives. And we'll talk more about that later. So females lay the eggs. Um, Prior to egg laying, there's increases in hormonal changes, increases estrogen and prolactin, among other reproductive hormones, and it stimulates the feathers to fall out. Then there's an increased blood flow to the brood patch, a single large brood patch, which it can incubate the eggs right around plus or minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit, etc. So we do things like measure eggs. We look at incubation periods. When I took ornithology a long time ago, they told us that at the top of the egg there was an air sac, and birds would break to the top and breathe their first air within the shell. Well, snowy owls out of the side, so I have no idea if they breathe air from the air sac or not. But we've learned that they hatch out from the side of the egg. About 33-day incubation period, plus or minus for each egg. So when they hatch out, the prototile, the first down, they're all white, as you can see here, very, very helpless. And as they age, the gray subcutaneous mesoptile down starts to come in, the second down, which will be the gray down, totally dependent. Their eyes are sealed shut. This is the egg tube which they break out with. And they're totally dependent on the female for thermal regulation because they can't thermoregulate on their own at this age, and for protection and food. And yeah, you can see these eggs here starting. There's a little pip coming out of that one there. Your internet connection is unstable. It just came up, so hopefully I don't lose you guys. Um, so anyway, they grow very, very quickly here. You can see they've all into their second down. They're probably all 7, 10, 11 days old here. And then as they grow, they just, totally again dependent on the female for food and warmth, particularly during inclement weather. And the male usually provides food at that time when the female feeds them. So this big chick here to the right, probably, starting to push, 2.5 weeks old here. And so we know that at 3 weeks of age, they leave the nest, generally in the order of which they are laid. They hatch asynchronously. That's why you see the size differences. So at times of large clutches, like 10 eggs, we can have a chick that's 10 days old in the nest and a chick that's 1 day old in the nest. Or it could be a wider span. So we follow them around. And again, we're trying to monitor their survival, from incubation and egg laying all the way up to fledging for every nest where possible, whether the nest fails or whether the nest is successful. It's a heck of a lot of work. There's only 2 studies in the world that do that detail, ours and then one over in Wrangel Island, Russia, but Irina has retired now. So anyway, the point of this graph here, you guys, is just to look right at the steepest part. That's what I want you to look at. I can't find my pointer. Maybe you can see that. The steepest part right in here. So between 2 weeks and 3 weeks of age. So they leave the nest roughly 3 weeks of age. It's always a plus or minus, but they put on their heaviest weight gains at that time because once they leave the nest, they don't go back to the nest. They might wander across, but they're done once they leave the nest. So you have to be able to deal with the weather. You have to be able to hide, and then you're totally dependent on the female and the male for food and protection at that time still. But you're out in inclement weather. So you got to watch out for foxes, which, the owls beat the foxes up pretty good, but every once in a while, a fox might get a chick or might get an egg. There's nothing you can do about a polar bear if it finds a nest or a chick, but we have seen the owls attack polar bears. And something like polar bear or something like caribou, all they're trying to do is whack them in the head or whack them in the butt and just redirect their path. And once they redirect the path, then the owls just kind of get back to business. Jaegers aren't, occasionally a Jaeger might get a chick or might get an egg. It kind of depends on things. But other than that, Jaegers are just big pain in the butt to the owls. and they're always attacking the owls because the Jaegers nest near the owls, and then the owls kill their chicks and eat them. So the Jaegers hate the owls. The owls don't like the Jaegers either. Anyway, so going back to leaving the nest at about 3 weeks of age, everybody is marked prior to leaving the nest. So we know just about every individual, their age and who they are as they hatch out and they grow. They all get banded just prior to leaving the nest. We've done a lot of growth rates and plumage development stuff on them. And so, but one of the questions was, why leave the nest at 3 weeks of age when you're not going to fly until you're 7 weeks old or more? And so you have to wander the tundra during those next 3 to 4 weeks, or sometimes a little more, a little less, depends on the individual bird. So what we did, we said, well, I wonder if they're stressed out. There's a lot of chicks in the nest. Is there enough food? Do big sibs beat up on little sibs? And would that cause them to leave the nest at, 3 weeks of age? So we got my friend, endocrinologist at Tufts University, to come in and look at stress hormones. And so basically, just look at the bottom left on this graph here. And so we looked at, the corticosterone levels, so the fight or flight response in relation to a stressful stimulus, making the assumption that banding the birds, handling them, trapping them, doing all the stuff that we do to them is a stressful stimulus. If we bleed them within 3 minutes, we can get their basal level, even though the stress response takes 3 to 5 minutes. So we would bleed them, but within 3 minutes of approaching the nest or actually grabbing them in hand. And then we looked at on the nest and off the nest. Long story short here is that their basal levels are the same, whether they're on the nest or they're off the nest and out on the tundra, indicating that when they leave the nest, they don't seem to be stressed out. They seem to be pretty calm, cool, and collected. And so the theory now is we believe they leave the nest because they're ground nesting species and they're susceptible to, in particular, perhaps mammalian predation, whether it's the fox, the polar bear, the coyote, the wolf, the wolverine, etc. The short-eared owl leaves the nest at about 2 weeks of age. Great horned owls, they're still in the nest 4 to 5 weeks of age. The snowy owl is similar size as the great horned owl, but why wouldn't it leave the nest? Because it's on the ground like a shorter owl at 2 weeks. And we just think it's such a big owl that this developmental process is. So it probably grows as fast as it can, but it takes time. That's why it's in the nest 3 weeks, even though it's on the ground. And their parents are ferocious at protecting the nest. So anyway, they're calm, cool, and collected. They leave the nest, wander the tundra, and dependent on their parents for food and protection. At this time there, they can all self-regulate, thermally, so they can put up all but the worst conditions. Our job then is to, monitor them every 3 days or so. And if we think they're sick, is try to figure out, well, all right, what's going on here? Why is it sick? Is it going to die? Not going to die? And our job is not to save them, as much as you want. You like them, and I've spent 35 years doing it. You like them. But my job is not to save them. My job is to figure out why some live and some die. So we do see mortality. Generally, most of the mortality we see is in the nest. And so, it it's kind of what we think is lemming related most of the time. They just run out of food or there's not enough food. The lemmings crash and you've got 7 chicks in the nest and maybe 2 or 3 make it and maybe a few do not. But we see most of our mortality within the nest. It's very sad. And then, however, every once in a while, we'll see mortality out of the nest. They usually make it. If they can leave that nest, they're going to make it to the fledgling stage. But something happens, an adult disappears, maybe it's shot, maybe it gets killed some other reason. Or sometimes we get prolonged rain, 3 heavy days, 4 heavy days of rain, where lemming activity we believe is reduced and the chicks starve to death. So usually in situations like that, we do gross necropsies and we send specific parts to the histopath. And it tends to be pneumonia is what's going on most of the time. So they starve to death and then they're susceptible to that. But some still make it. And so they're continuing to grow and we follow them. They're all marked. You can see down the band on the left hand, on the leg there, we band all the birds on the left leg. And they're starting to look pretty good. At this point in time, they're about as good looking a bird as there is in the world, personally. And so here they are. Some make it, some don't. We continue to monitor them. They're kind of, they're growing here. And we started seeing this. If you look closely at these two, and on my left here, you're right, but the light colored one And then the other one is kind of a sooty colored gray. So you got a light gray and a sooty gray. And on the sooty gray one here, you can see there's a lot of heavy markings on the feathers down here. And on the light colored gray one here, there isn't so much. And, start pushing, 30, 35 days as their wing feathers are developing, their flight feathers, you start to see this pattern out of the same nest. The heavily marked ones we predict as a female, the lightly marked ones we predict as a male. And so we decided to tackle this and see if we could figure out how to do it. So this is a composite feather. We took blood, we looked at all the feathers, we made drawings of all the primary and secondary feathers, and took blood, and then we kind of saw that some of the markings here were up at the top, what we call TBs, transverse bars. They hit the rachis or the shaft in the middle. The next one in the middle were irregular bars. They weren't continuous across, but they were kind of alternate, but they still hit the shaft or the rachis in the middle. And then there was these little blobs, we just called them spots down here that didn't hit the rachis in the middle. So we made a little composite of the feathers here. Then we took 140 samples. We sent them into the geneticists. They asked us what are your predictions of sexes, and we said we're not telling you. And so if you can believe us that we told the truth, we didn't tell them. We said you tell us what you come up with. We have all the predictions down, and we'll tell you once you tell us. Anyway, we got all 140 correct, and genetically as well as our predictions here. And then we got some help here. We did a little model. Anyway, long story short, if you look in the left-hand column, secondary number 4, if it has a spot, it's a male. If it has a bar, transverse bar, or any bar touching the shaft, it's a female. The model predicted that we would get 98% correct using that method. We got them all right because, we're not a model. And now, people throughout the country were using this technique to age first-year birds. It's only in that first year of life. So anyway, they're as good looking as you can imagine any animal can be. And it's continuing to grow. Last place where they'll lose all their down is up in the head, the top of the head, in particular the neck. And so we continue to follow them until they move on. Other things that we do is we measure nests. And it's kind of funny here because my Nupian friends up there, they always kind of make fun of us, and they say, "Hey, call us eugenics, white guys. How come you're always measuring the nests?" And I go, "Well, we want to see if the owls are selecting a certain type of nest over a random sample of nests." And they say, "Doesn't everyone already know that? They take the highest mounds, that melt off first in the spring, and they have a nice breeze as summer progresses." So we do all the measurements, and we do all of this and the that. But we can tell you one thing that the once it gets cold there in the wintertime and the tundra freezes, it cracks, and then ice falls down in the cracks, or water melts in the spring down in the cracks, then it freezes again. So this is a 500th year in the bottom right-hand corner, but those mounds we believe are like old growth forests. They're 10,000 years old, and those are the mounds the snowy owls are nesting on. So even though the Inupiats are right about that, at least we can say we know they're 10,000 years old. So we measure the random sites, we measure the used sites, and of course, it's all significantly different. And they laugh at us and make fun of us. And they say, "You guys are always counting things. If you just make some observations, you'd know what's going on." So anyway, we capture and ban birds where possible here. And the first, actually maybe the first owls in the world, but the first snowy owls in the world, we put the satellite transmitters on, the first 6, and got some cool information. That kind of started this whole thing. And now there's who knows how many snowy owls of satellite transmitters on. The technology is much better. The data is better and all that. But we use that stuff. There's the first owl in the world with a satellite transmitter right there, big female from Barrow. Uh, and then we kind of learned some stuff that they moved. And this kind of gave us some insight into some of these birds never moved south during the winter. Here's the Arctic Circle, as you can see right in there. And then we used incubation periods, nesting stints to look at our locations and kind of say, okay, looks like they could have bred here. Looks like they probably didn't breed here. And in later years, the people doing it now have tightened up that time frame to say, yeah, they're probably breeding. So I believe that they probably are breeding, but is it one bird or is it another bird? So even though we have that information, we tend not to go and ground truth it most of the time and all that, which is another part of it. But anyway, kind of some cool stuff that we did to lead to what's going on today. All right. So anyway, as I said earlier, females and males, they have specific duties, both in rearing a family and in nest defense here. And basically, what it is females lay eggs, incubate, brood, males hunt, and males do most of the nest protection here. So this is male. This is the weapons that they use here. Think of your thumb as digit number one down in the corner of the helix, and you can see clearly the heavily feathered feet down in here, and that's no doubt for thermal regulation in the Arctic. And this is a male doing what he does best, killing lemmings and bringing back to the female. They kill weasels, both least and short-tailed weasels up there. Red phalaropes are a favorite of all the shorebird species that breed there. For some reason, a little plump red phalarope is something that of the few species of birds that they eat in any few numbers or small percentages, it's the red phalarope. They eat the Stellarzida, a threatened species that kind of annoys the duck crew for the Fish and Wildlife. But we find it, just another food item. Not many, but they eat them. This was one of the most remarkable things that we saw up there. This is a female snow owl came off the nest, killed this male spectacled eider, and barely could fly, but carried it back to the nest, and where she fed with her chicks for 2 days on. This happens, I think sometimes people, I don't know, I don't know if you get angry or sad or whatever they think, but they don't think positively. This is a young chick that died in the nest. In this case here, the female fed it to another chick. So in times of food shortage, as I said, um, half of the brood could die in the nest. And so sometimes the females will eat them, sometimes they feed them to the chicks, sometimes they just lay there. Reasons for all that, I don't know. But we clearly see it. But if you think about it, it's still the female. She had one of her young die, but she still has other young to feed and other young to try to, raise to fledging. And so it's just, being a mother and getting over, I guess, the death of one and then taking care of the ones that are surviving. But primarily up where we live there and throughout the world, they eat lemmings. This is the collar lemming, the one that turns white in the wintertime. And this is the brown lemming that stays brown throughout its life. And this is what drives the system up at Barrows, the brown lemming, and in most areas. All right, so you got lemming, pellet, skulls, and we quantify the skulls. And, don't put this in there to make fun of what we do as researchers because no one can read these. And basically, this is what it is. So from the pellets, we've identified 43,689 prey. It's 95% brown lemmings. And then we look at the diversity indices. Basically, from pellet analysis, you would conclude they eat basically one and a half, species. And this is what it looks like in the nest. You can see the brown lemmings piled around the nest here. And this is cached at the nest. So we go to the nest. This is another one. I just make fun of us because this is what you see at professional conferences. But if we count and we go to nest and we look at the caches versus the pellets, we see that our species composition diversifies a little bit, but still the brown lemming is 88% based on 3,330 caches at nest, even though you can get other species, passerines, gulls, shorebirds, etc. And the diversity index goes up a little bit, but basically they eat 1 to 2 species, and that's it. So anything that affects, in particular, brown lemmings up there is going to affect snow owl reproduction. This is what it looks like in a good lemming year. There's 50 plus lemmings piled up here. This is what the female does. Male brings them in, female piles them up, and that way she can reach right out. We didn't put them in this order. This is what it looks like, and she'll sit there on the chicks, reach out, grab a lemming, tear it apart, and feed her chicks. They don't really rot because it's so cold up there, and so they last for quite a while. All right, and what we do with the nest, this is great because we learned this early on. The owls provide us free data. So we're able to go to the nest. And that wasn't on my mind when we designed the project. I had no idea. And I thought, wow, look at all these lemmings piled, all this stuff piled up in the nest. So we're able to get reproductive data out of them. We get body mass, we get sex ratios, we get reproductive status, all this free data that we had never even known about or thought about was provided by the owls for us. And so then we would tally that, cut off one leg so we wouldn't double count it in the next visit. Anyway, so I put this in blue here. I just want you to see this is 18 breeding seasons and pretty big sample sizes. You can see down there 1,300, 1,100 males and females. So the mean body mass of males and females is 71 grams that we find cached at the nest. Then we also sample lemmings for the last 30 years as well, doing a snap trapping method. Uh, People don't do as much these days, but we're able to get reproductive status on the lemmings and all that stuff. Unfortunately, that's what we do. And we count nests, and then we count lemmings along transects. Okay, so when I look at during those 18 breeding seasons, the grand mean of what we trap, and again, sample sizes are pretty huge here, but the grand mean of the ones in our trap lines are 48 grams. The grand means of the ones that were at the nest were 71 grams. And so here it is again, 71 grams at the nest. Snap trapped over 18 breeding seasons, 48. Snap trapped over 12 non-breeding seasons, 53. So no difference between them. And the bottom line, the data suggests that the males are selectively bringing the biggest lemmings to their females. Now, are they eating the small ones? Are they passing them up? We really don't know that. But it suggests that males, no matter what's out there, that they're bringing the biggest ones if our trapping data is indicative of what's actually out there. And the samples are so big that we've probably, brought the variances down, and it's probably pretty true. The confidence intervals are pretty tight. So that's what it looks like. Males bring the females the biggest lemmings. There's your nice looking lemming there. They're actually kind of cool looking little things, more like hamsters than anything else. And then, as you can see here, that at Barrow over, 30 something years now, that's 2024, so 35 years or so, you can see the populations fluctuate for sure. And is there a cycle or pattern? I don't really believe in cycles anymore, but certainly I believe in patterns. But you can see the trend line is downward. So for some reason, they're disappearing at Barrow. Um, but it only takes 1 year. It's been down for several years now, but it only takes one good year to bring that line up and flatline it, or a couple of good years to bring it above the negative. But right now it's going down. Is it climate change? Something going on with lemmings? We're trying to expect that, but I can't tell the answer really right now. But you can clearly see the association with number of nests and number of lemmings. The nests are in the blue, the lemmings are in the red. It's very highly correlated. So they're totally dependent on lemmings in the Barrow region and totally dependent on one species, the brown lemming. Here's the brown lemming again. Okay, so here's our study area, and here's the nest. This is kind of cool here. So all those little squares are, I can't remember, this is maybe 280, 85 nests represented here. When we look at nest distribution in the 100 square mile study area, and if we look at it, nests are randomly distributed, mathematically when we analyze it, when we do it year to year. But when we look at cumulatively over 18 years, there's significant clumping in the nest, which is, again, we didn't know that. And I have to get these, super young kids that are good mathematicians and things of that sort to help out on things like this. So if you look at this, if you start in the right-hand corner, the kind of clump, move to the left, kind of clumped. You can see some clumping here, some clumping there. And you move in the center, they're clumping. You move up here, they're clumped, they're clumped, they're clumped. So annually, they're randomly distributed over the lifetime of a project. And again, the need for long-term research is short-term research is just snippets. And so they're significantly clumped. And what we find is they're clumped in this areas here. These are what we call the high center polygons or the ridges. This is where the nests occur, and this is where we find the highest density of lemmings. So are they taking the nests? Are they there for the lemmings? Doesn't matter. The nests melt off first, but this is also the highest density of lemmings. Is it just coincidence that it matches? I don't know the answer to that. Does one come before the other, or is it just the way it is? But anyway, so the highest density of lemmings are in this habitat, and it's also where the owls nest on the ground where they have a commanded view of the surrounding countryside. Snowy owl populations, there's all kinds of estimates, and I'm not so sure we know. If we go back to 2004, someone came up with the global estimate of 290,000. And then someone in 2006 for North America came to 72,500. Then it went back in 2009, 14,000 females equal 28,000 adults if you have a 50-50 sex ratio. No one's known that, but we do. And then it was 8,000 pairs. Then it's 200,000 globally, 100,000 North America. Then it's 30,000 individuals. And now we're getting to a place where 2016, 2020 are kind of matching the 2009 mitochondrial DNA, even though you can't use it for population structure, but it gives an idea of maybe how many females times the equal amount of males, 20,000, 30,000. Then we went down to 15,000, 2023. And that's the effective population size using SNPs, which is single nucleotide polymorphism. I don't understand it, but I have a okay handle on it. Um, and they tell us it was like 15,300 needed to have an effective population size for the population to continue. I don't know about that. But now we're at that point that we think it's 25 to 30,000. My only question is, how do we know? How do we validate this stuff? We do all this stuff. We do these models. We use the SNPs technique. We give these estimations. We try to look at the amount of tundra and the number of individuals, the potential for this, and that. We keep coming up with it. But the one thing we don't do is try to validate it. So I think we still have to go out and do surveys to get some validation to our estimates. It may be true, but you gotta, if we go to court on things like this, we got to have something more than, well, this is our best guess. All right, we're not even going to go here with using that. Okay, how do they do? I've always been, people are always on my butt to say, be anti-oil and gas exploration up in the Arctic, and because it affects snowy owl. So my job is not to, no matter what I think, our job is to provide data. And you can see in the distance here, that's a big gas refinery right there and a gas pumping station. It's not too far from the snowy owl nest. And this is one of our most productive nests. So the owls do really well. It's because nobody goes near them. The photographers, the wildlife researchers, the birders, etc. These owls are pretty much left alone, and the people who work there, they might go out and take pictures and all that. So I can't say at this point that any of this exploration has any effect on the owls, because the owls are super forgiving. As long as, again, you're not running over them on your four-wheeler or your snowmobile and stealing their chicks or shooting them. And this is a problem. So Utqiagvik, a place to hunt snowy owls. Its past has been a place to hunt Etham. But this is what we found doing the studies. We'd find birds shot. We don't know who's doing it or any of that. So they weren't really being eaten anymore, but people were shooting them for reasons we don't know. We found that birds were in leg hold traps for foxes, but this was over in Europe trying to catch wolves. And again, this is all kind of hearsay and email correspondence where they thought hundreds of seasons were being trapped in wolf traps to sell their eyes in the aphrodisiac market down in Asia. And so how much is true, we don't know, but clearly many of them are trapped and killed. This was an unfortunate one here. This went on for a while. We didn't get the real numbers. This is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's program to protect the threatened Steller's eider. And they went out there to trap foxes, and they caught lots of things, including snowy owls, which I found several in traps like this. We have not been able to get, the data on how many they trapped and killed, not only snowy owls, but other species of birds and mammals as well. So that was kind of sad, but it's over now. Once it's hit the internet, it ended. Anyway. So why are snowy owls white? Gloger's rule, animals in the Arctic tend to be white, animals in the tropics tend to be dark, animals in wet areas tend to be a little darker, all that stuff there. But what's kind of neat here is that there's no other owl species in the world that is sexually colored dimorphic as a snowy owl. You can see subtle differences in barn owl males and females, long-eared owls, short-eared owls, all species that we've worked on, but nothing is like a snowy owl. So anyway, we think that yeah, they're wider base white to match the Arctic environment, even where they winter, it's a snowy habitat. But why do the females retain the white barring in the speckling, and young males resemble females and don't get to breed until they reach their white at 4 to 5 years of age? So this is what it looks like. This is a male, bright white on the left there. This is the female. She's base white with brown speckling here. Young males that look like the females and that take 4 to 5 years before they start to become bright white like males, at least in our study, do not breed. Only these bright white males get to breed. And you can see here, this is the bright white male, this is the speckled or barred female. So what we think is going on is sexual selection maybe is going on here. It could be males are bright white for male competition where they're showing off their brightness to each other. I don't think so. What we think is going on is that females can arrive on an area, they can see these bright white males. And if you're a bright white male, you have a territory, you have resources. If you're a young male that resembles a female, you don't have that. You sit on the sidelines, you maybe hang out in bachelor groups, and you don't get to breed. And so, what we think is going on is the females what can, you know, we believe that they can look at these bright white males and say, okay, my chances of raising a family with an adult male with territory and resources are greater than hanging out with these males that don't really have anything. So look at it like dollar bills if you want. So uh anyway, so we thought, well, I wonder if males are reflecting the UV range. We found this is just based on a sample one, and I got a guy from NASA to help us on doing the spectral analysis here. And anyway, these males are bright white. They display to the females. They show them their backs, they show them their breasts, and they show them lemmings. And so we did all the spectral analysis here. And what it came down to was we didn't see them reflecting the UV range, but we need better equipment. And so I just was talking to the guy that helps us out yesterday. He said, "Don't let's not do anything yet with this. We're still preliminary, but right now they're really brilliant white, but they probably do not reflect in the UV range as far as we can tell at the moment. But we're working on it." So anyway, the owls grow, fall's coming, cotton grass is all blooming now, peeking out, and the females are not paying as much attention. They're off to the sidelines a little bit, but they're still near the chicks. And then, before you know it, the female leaves, male continues to feed chicks, and all of a sudden, birds start showing up in the northern tier of the United States in what we call eruption migrations, where these snowy owls come. And or actually, I'll go back here. And probably I would argue that there is no greater wildlife viewing event in the United States or Canada than when snowy owls show up during the eruption migrations. Everyone goes to see them, not just birders. Everybody goes to see, the big white owl from the north. So anyhow, what is an eruption? It barely fits. The Merriam-Webster dictionary of eruption barely fits what we call a snowy owl eruption. So I'm going to leave this alone. Other definitions that we use to describe stuff are kind of way out there, but eruption migration kind of fits, and it's hard just to throw it away. But ecological definitions of what it is are just so dubious. So anyway, we'll stick with eruption migration for now. And then aging and sexing on eruption migrations. The one on the left to me is clearly a young female, hatchier bird. The one on the right is a female, but how old is it? Is it hatchier too, or is it greater than 1 or 2 years old? So people often say that they can age these snowy owls, and I've read some papers where people age and sex them. Myself and the people I consider the winter experts are all the banders and trappers from Canada and a few from Massachusetts and New York and Great Lakes region. They say you can't, and they're right. You can't. So are these all males, or is this male and female? I don't know. I happen to have trouble in the breeding season identifying some of these young males from very light colored females. All right, so the snowy owls, they continue to just, we do all this research, but they could care less. They're there just to raise families. Look how white this female is. If you saw this female in the wintertime in Rochester, would you call it a male? Would you call it a female? I'll bet you a lot of you would call it a male until you caught it. And my friends who trap ban these things, they make, they said, Denver, I called it this and I caught it and it was that, and so all these papers that come out saying they can age and sex them, we have trouble believing that. So here's some party shots for you. These are chicks just getting ready to leave the nest, adult female. Pretty neat stuff here. I'll just leave you with a couple of these shots. I think this male, it looks like, what have I done? I was floating around by myself and then I decided to mate and raise a family and can't wait until the dispersal time. And this is kind of cool here. So what I want you to see here, you guys, and each year when we're able to, we put a live camera in snowy owl nest, and it's the only camera in the world 24/7 on a snowy owl. You go to our website, we have a lot of live cams on owls, but this is the only snowy owl one. So let's hope this works here. And this is just what life is like. Female on the nest, males provide food. So that's it. I don't know if we have time to field questions. Hope that was worthwhile for you guys. Go to our website, support our work, but go to our website and check this stuff out. We got a lot going on, and yeah, probably the most active owl research group in the world because we do it for a living. And it's not just going out in the summer for a couple of weeks. This is what we do full time, winter studies as well as breeding season studies. So thank you very much. And I don't know how you guys want to handle questions. I'll just sit here and wait till someone tells me what to do.
Can I ask the first question then?
Absolutely.
Are you right there in Alaska right now?
No, no, I'm home in Montana, and so I'll be heading up to the Arctic. I've never watch full courtship, and I've only seen the tail end of it when we go up there. So this year, before I get too old, I want to just sit and watch full courtship where these males fly around and court the female, and then they stand on a mound and they present their backs and their wings, and look at me, and the female in theory assesses, okay, if you got something, I'll mate with you. If you don't, there's someone else, and so I want to go up and see that. And we talk about very often how do snowy owls know where to stop and where to go when they're migrating back to the North Country for their breeding seasons. So how do they search and how do they evaluate, lemmings? And we always assume that it's lemmings, but one of the things that if you work on them on the breeding grounds and a little bit more about owls and owl courtship, maybe they're not looking for lemmings indirect or directly. Maybe they're looking for males on territories who've already assessed the lemming situation, and he will provide her with, enough lemmings and to show her that, okay, stay and breed with me and we'll be able to raise a family, or does she evaluate and move on? So maybe they're looking for males on territories and they make a decision to stay or not versus, just kind of moving throughout the tundra and looking for and looking and evaluating lemmings. And how do they evaluate lemmings? If lemmings are supposed to be subnivean, well, staying under the snow during the wintertime, well, the collar lemming turns white. So it must surface. Why else would it turn white? And the brown lemming stays brown, but it must surface too, because for the most part, like at Barrow, that's what they eat. And down here today, with all the snow on the ground here, we still see voles running across the snow surface. We see the hawks catching them and the owls catching them. Why would lemmings be that much different? So that's what I'm trying to figure out too, going up early. All right, sorry. Next question. Sorry about that.
If you want to actually pass it around to the audience, I'll go to the other side here.
Okay, you've got a question?
Hi, Denver. Thank you so much. Just a question. I know it's a little unrelated. I know you're working on long-eared owls. How is the long-eared owl population doing in the Missoula area? How is that study going?
The long-enough population of Missoula is doing pretty good. And so, again, going back to long-term research, if you go to our website and you look at our newsletter, we show you two graphs to illustrate the importance of long-term research. One is the snowy owls, and you saw the decline over time, even though there's population fluctuations. The graph in our newsletter, you can get it or see it online, shows long-eared owls. And the point I make in both of those graphs is if you're a graduate student and you study things for the typical 1 to 3 seasons, you might conclude in this year, oh, they look good. And you might conclude over these 2 years or 1 or 3, oh, God, something's wrong. But if you have 35 years of data, you see the population fluctuate and the Missoula population is stable. The line goes right through the middle. So it's very, very stable down there. Whereas the populations fluctuate with snowies, but the decline is evident over time. So I know we need short-term studies for training, but you got to be careful with what you believe. So long-ears are doing great. Go to our website. We have a live camera right now on a winter roost of long-eared owls, and you can watch them in the roost site.
Hi, Denver. Thank you for the talk. It was great. I just had a question about avian influenza and if you guys are doing any surveillance or any sampling up in Alaska. I know in New England and in New York, we've had a couple positive cases of snowies. So wondering what your thoughts are.
We're not doing any specific research, but their Department of Wildlife up there at the Inupiats, they have their own Department of Wildlife, and they have a vet on staff there. And I think last 2 years they've had a couple of snow owls that tested positive, but we don't ourselves do the research. We just kind of turn things in that we find.
Any other questions?
Here.
Oh,
We've monitored the migration of Jaegers on Lake Ontario, and over the last 30 to 50 years, we've seen them migrating earlier in fall. And one of the possibilities is, has there been a decrease in the population of lemmings in the Arctic? Do you see any trend in lemming numbers over time?
At Barrow, clearly, yeah, the lemmings are decreasing at Barrow. At least the trend is downward now. Again, it only takes one good year to bring it up. Now, in other areas, there's been two papers in the last couple of years that specifically looked at lemming populations worldwide in relation to weather and climate. And these two papers have indicated that they see no effect, that lemming populations are stable. But there's other studies who have studied snowy owls and foxes and weasels and Jaegers and all that at a more local or regional level, and they have seen declines in the lemmings. And once the lemmings have declined, they lose the Jaegers, they lose the foxes, they lose the owls. Everything seems to move on. So it's kind of interesting that the worldwide review has concluded that climate change and or just lemming populations throughout the circumpolar region are stable, whereas local researchers like myself, we definitely see a decline locally. So I don't know. I mean, what does that say? Does it say that? I don't know what to say. Which one's more important, a local decline or a region-wide decline? Are the region-wide models accurate? Local usually tends to be, maybe a little more intensive, and maybe you can get to it on a finer resolution. I don't know the answer to that, but there's some smart people working on it. And one of the things that I read not too long ago with some of these people who study, they do grid sampling of lemmings, is that a cycle, they use the word cycle. I don't believe in it, but anyway, they use the word cycle, and then they say now that cycles can disappear for years and then reappear. So I don't know if that fits the definition of a cycle, but there's clearly patterns. I mean, there's no doubt about that. So at least in Barrow, I would say the lemmings right now, the trend line is downward, and it is with the owls. And when the lemmings are up, the owls are up. They're very highly correlated.
questions? Oh,
First of all, thanks very much for that talk. Just to build on that question about the lemmings, do they also track the average weight of the lemmings? So do they, in addition to seeing the lemmings go down, do they see their average weight go down over time?
You know, that's pretty good that you came up with that because I don't think these guys who did it do it, but I asked in a paper I recently published, one of the things I said was that if lemmings are declining in some areas, but voles are expanding north in several sites now, will voles replace lemmings in the Arctic? I mean, I don't know, it's all theoretical. But one of the questions I asked, if lemmings are weighing 70 grams on average at the nest, these adults, and voles are weighing 40 grams, will the body mass of voles be enough to sustain breeding snowy owls if voles replace snowy owls in the Arctic due to climate change, if that all happens? Uh, so yeah, I don't know, but we have posed a question. Or have lemming body masses gone down? And so I looked at this historic research in Barrow from 1955 to 1974. And I noticed that their body mass for adult male and female, non-pregnant female lemmings was 10 grams heavier than my body mass over all those years. Could it be just differences in sampling? Or is there some truth to it? I don't know, but it's a really neat question to pose.
anyone else? Okay.
Did you have any questions online? Were there was anybody watching this question?
Yeah, he can see them. But there are no questions right now.
Well,
Okay.
thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank
and go
you.
to our website and tell your group to go to our website. We need a host of things to keep all these projects going. We have 10 major research projects, and we need things from four-wheelers to, funding to this and that. So anyhow, thank you. Thank you for your opportunity to speak to your group, and I hope it was worthwhile. And I guess I'll sign off. Does that sound right?
Thank you. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Thank you, Denver.
Yeah. Thank you
Okay.
everyone for
I've asked-
coming. Yeah.
Yep. Take care. Bye-bye.